Part 1, Chapter 1 of the Manxman. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Tony Ashworth. The Manxman by Sir Caine. Chapter 5. Catherine Caine, Pete's champion at school, had been his companion at home as well. She was 2 years younger than Pete. Her hair was as black as a gypsy's, and her face as brown as a berry. In summer she liked best to wear a red frock without sleeves. No boots and no stockings, no collar and no bonnet, not even a sunbonnet. From constant exposure to the sun and rain, her arms and legs were as ruddy as her cheeks, and covered with a soft silken down. So often did you see her teeth that you would have said she was always laughing. Her laugh was a little saucy trill, given out with head aside and eyes aslant, like that of a squirrel when he is at a safe height above your head and has a nut in his open jaws. Pete had seen her first at school, and there he had tried to draw the eyes of the maiden upon himself by methods known only to heroes, to savages, and to boys. He had prowled around her in the playground with the wild vigour of a young colt, tossing his head, swinging his arms, screwing his body, kicking up his legs, walking on his hands, lunging out at every lad that was twice as big as himself, and then bringing himself down at length with a whoop and a crash on his hindmost parts, just in front of where she stood. For these tremendous efforts to show what a fellow he could be if he tried, he had won no applause from the boys, and Catherine herself had given no sign, though Pete had watched her out of the corners of his eyes. But in other scenes the children came together. After Philip had gone to King William's, Pete and Catherine had become bosom friends. Instead of going home after school to cool his heels in the road until his mother came from the fields, he found it neighbourly to go up to Ballajora and round by the network of paths to Caine. That was a long detour, but Caesar's mill stood there. It nestled down in the low bed of the river that runs through the glen called Ballaglass. Songbirds built about it in the spring of the year, and Caesar's little human songster sang there always. When Pete went that way home, what times the girl had of it, wading up the river, clambering over the stones, playing female blondin on the fallen tree trunks that spanned the chasm, slipping, falling, holding on any way up, legs or arms, by the rotten branches below, then calling for Pete's help in a voice between a laugh and a cry, flinging chips into the foaming backwash of the mill wheel, and chasing them downstream, racing among the gorse, and then lying full length like a lamb without a thought of shame, while Pete took the thorns out of her bleeding feet. She was a wild duck in the glen where she lived, and Pete was a great lumbering tame duck waddling behind her. But the glorious, happy, make-believe days too soon came to an end. The swinging cane of the great John Thomas Corlett and the rod of a yet more relentless tyrant darkened the sunshine of both the children. Pete was banished from school, and Catherine's father removed from Caine. When Caesar had taken a wife, he had married Betsy, the daughter of the owner of the inn at Sulby. After that he had got religion, and he held that persons in the household of faith were not to drink, or to buy, or to sell drink. But Granny's father died and left his house, the Manx Ferry, and his farm, Glenmore, to her and her husband. About the same time the miller at Sulby also died, and the best mill in the island cried out for a tenant. Caesar took the mill and the farm, and Granny took the inn, being brought up to such profanities and no way bound by principle. From that time forward Caesar pinned all envious cavillers with the text which says, "Not that which goeth into the mouth of a man defileth him, but that which cometh out." Nevertheless, Caesar's principles grew more and more puritanical year by year. There were no half measures with Caesar. Either a man was a saved soul, or he was in the very belly of hell, though the pit might not have shut its mouth on him. If a man was saved, he knew it, and if he felt the manifestations of the Spirit, he could live without sin. His cardinal principles were three: instantaneous regeneration, assurance, and sinless perfection. He always said, he had said it 1,000 times, that he was converted in Douglas marketplace, a piece off the west door of old St. Matthew's, at 6:25 on a Sabbath evening in July, when he was 22 for harvest. While at Caine, Caesar had been a local on the preacher's plan, a class leader, and a chapel steward, but at Sulby he outgrew the Union and set up a body of his own. He called them the Christians, a title that was at once a name, a challenge, and a protest. They worshipped in the long barn over Caesar's mill, and held strong views on conduct. A saved soul must not wear gold or costly apparel, or give way to softness or bodily indulgence, or go to fairs for sake of sport, or appear in the show tents of play actors, or sing songs, or read books, or take any diversion that did not tend to the knowledge of God. As for carnal transgression, if any were guilty of it, they were to be cut off from the body of believers, for the souls of the righteous must be delivered. "The religion that's going among the primitives these days is just popery," said Caesar. "Let's go back to the warm old Methodism and put out the Romans." When Pete turned his face from Ballawhaine, he thought first of Caesar and his mill. It would be more exact to say he thought of Catherine and Granny. He was homeless as well as penniless. The cottage by the water trough was no longer possible to him, now that the mother was gone who had stood between his threatened shoulders and Black Tom. Philip was at home for a few weeks only in the year, and Ballure had lost its attraction. So Pete made his way to Sulby, offered himself to Caesar for service at the mill, and was taken on straightway at 18 pence a week and his board. It was a curious household he entered into. First there was Caesar himself, in a moleskin waistcoat with sleeves open 3 buttons up, knee breeches usually unlaced, stockings of undyed wool, and slippers with the tongues hanging out, a grim soul with whiskers like a hoop about his face, and a shaven upper lip as heavy as a moustache, for when religion like Caesar's lays hold of a man, it takes him first by the mouth. Then Granny, a comfortable body in a cap, with an outlook on life that was all motherhood, a simple, tender, peaceable soul, agreeing with everybody and everything, and seeming to say nothing but poor thing, and dear heart, dear heart. Then there was Nancy Caine, getting the name of Nancy Joe, the servant in name but the mistress in fact, a niece of Granny's, a bit of a pagan, an early riser, a tireless worker, with a plain face, a rooted disbelief in all men, a good heart, an ugly tongue, and a vixenish temper. Last of all there was Catherine, now grown to be a great girl, with her gypsy hair done up in a red ribbon and wearing a black pinafore bordered with white braid. Pete got on steadily at the mill. He began by lighting the kiln fire and cleaning out the pit wheel, and then on to the opening the floodgates in the morning and regulating the action of the water wheel according to the work of the day. In 2 years' time he was a sound miller, safe to trust with rough stuff for cattle or fine flour for white loaf bread. Caesar trusted him. He would take evangelising journeys to Peel or Douglas and leave Pete in charge. That led to the end of the beginning. Pete could grind the farmers' corn, but he could not make their reckonings. He kept his counts in chalk on the back of the mill house door, a down line for every stone weight up to 8 stones, and a line across for every 100 weight. Then, once a day, while the father was abroad, Catherine came over from the inn to the desk at the little window of the mill, and turned Pete's lines into ledger accounts. These financial councils were full of delicious discomfiture. Pete always enjoyed them, after they were over. John Robert, Molly Caine. Did you say Molly Caine, Pete? Oh, Mile Caine. Mile, Charaine. Molly Caine. 10 stones? Did you say 10? Oh, 8. Eight. No, 8. Oatmeal, Pete? Oh, barley meal. Meal, meal. In the middle of the night Pete remembered all these entries. They were very precious to his memory after Catherine had spoken them. They sang in his heart the same as songbirds then. They were like hymns and tunes and pieces of poetry. Caesar returned home from a preaching tour with a great and sudden thought. He had been calling on strangers to flee from the wrath to come, and yet there were those of his own house whose faces were not turned Zionwards. That evening he held an all-night prayer meeting for the conversion of Catherine and Pete. Through 6 long hours he called on God in lusty tones, until his throat cracked and his forehead streamed. The young were thoughtless. They had the root of evil in them. They flew into frivolity from contrariness. Draw the harrow over their souls, plough the fallows of their hearts, grind the chaff out of their household. Let not the sweet apple and the crabs grow on the same bough together. Give them a melea. Let not a sheaf be forgotten. Grant them the soul of this girl for a harvest home, and of this boy for a last stook. Cæsar was dissatisfied with the results. He was used to groaning and trembling and fainting fits. "Don't you feel the love?" he cried. "I do, here, under the watch pocket of my waistcoat." Towards midnight, Catherine began to fail. "Chain the devil," cried Cæsar. "Once I was down in the pit with the devil myself, but now I'm up in the loft, seeing angels through the thatch. Can't you feel the workings of the Spirit?" As the clock was warning to strike 2, Catherine thought she could, and from that day forward she led the singing of the women in the choir among the Christians. Pete remained among the unregenerate, but nevertheless the Christians saw him constantly. He sat on the back form and kept his eyes fixed on the singing seat. Observing his regularity, Cæsar laid a hand on his head and told him the Spirit was working in his soul at last. Sometimes Pete thought it was, and that was when he shut his eyes and listened to Catherine's voice floating up, 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 like an angel's into the sky. But sometimes he knew it was not, and that was when he caught himself in the middle of Cæsar's mightiest prayers, crooking his neck past the pitching bald pate of Johnny Niplightly, the constable, that he might get a glimpse of the top of Catherine's bonnet when her eyes were down. Pete fell into a melancholy, and once more took to music as a comforter. It was not a home-made whistle now, but a fiddle bought out of his wages. On this he played in the cow-house on winter evenings, and from the top of the midden outside in summer. When Cæsar heard of it, his wrath was fearful. What was a fiddler? He was a servant of corruption, holding a candle to disorderly walkers and happy sinners on their way into the devil's pinfold. And what for was fiddles? Fiddles was for play-actors and theatres. "And theatres is there," said Cæsar, indicating with his foot one flag on the kitchen floor. "And hell flames is there," he added, rolling his toe over to the joint of the next one. Granny began to plead. What was a fiddle if you played the right tunes on it? Didn't they read in the old book of King David himself playing on harps and timbrels and such things? And what was harps but fiddles in a way of speaking? Then warn't they all looking to be playing harps in heaven? 'Deed yes, though the Lord would have to be teaching her how to play hers. Cæsar was shaken. "Well, of course, certainly," he said, "if there's a power in fiddling to bring souls out of bondage, and if there's going to be fiddling and the like in Abraham's bosom, why then, of course, well, why not? Let's have the lads fiddle up at the Christians." Nothing could have suited Pete so well. From that time forward he went out no more at nights to the cow-house, but stayed indoors to practise hymns with Catherine. Oh, the terrible rapture of those nightly practices! They brought people to the inn to hear them, and so Cæsar found them good for profit both ways. There was something in Cæsar's definition, nevertheless. It was found that among the saints there were certain weaker brethren who did not want a hymn to their ale. One of these was Johnny Niplightly, the rural constable, who was the complement of Catherine in the choir, being leader of the singing among the men. He was a tall man, with a long nose, which seemed to have a perpetual cold. Making his rounds one night, he turned in at the Manx Ferry, when Cæsar and Granny were both from home, and Nancy Joe was in charge, and Pete and Catherine were practising a revival chorus. "Where's Cæsar, Doe?" he snuffled. "At Peel, buying the stock," snapped Nancy. "Thank the Lord. Where's Granny?" "Nursing Mistress Quiggin." Niplightly eased the strap of his beaver, liberated his lips, took a deep draught of ale, and then turned to Pete, with apologetic smiles, and suggested a change in the music. At that Catherine leapt up, as light as laughter. "A dance!" she cried. "A dance!" "Good sakes alive!" said Nancy Joe. "Listen to the girl. Is it the moon, Kitty, or what is it that's doing on you?" "Shut your eyes, Nancy," said Catherine, "just for once, now, won't you?" "You can do what you like with me, with your coaxing and woaxing," said Nancy. "Enjoy yourself to the full, girl, but don't make a noise above the singing of the kettle." Pete tuned his strings, and Catherine pinned up the tail of her skirt and threw herself into position. At the sound of the livelier preludings there came thronging out of the road into the parlour certain fellows of the baser sort, and behind them came one who was not of that denomination, a fair young man with a fine face under an alpine hat. Heeding nothing of this audience, the girl gave a little rakish toss of her head, and called on Pete to strike up. Then Pete plunged into one of the profaner tunes which he had practised in the days of the cow-house, and off went Catherine with a whoop. The boys stood back for her, bending down on their haunches as at a fight of gamecocks, and encouraging her with shouts of applause. "Beautiful! Look at that now! Fine, though, fine! Cledden done, Cledden, done to a dot. There's leaping for you, boys. Guy heng, did you ever see the like? Hommer the floor, girl, higher a piece, higher then. Whoop, did ye ever see such a nate pair of ankles? Hold your dirty tongue, you gob-mouthed omathorn," cried Nancy Joe. She had tried to keep her eyes away, but could not. "My goodness gracious," she cried, "did you ever see the like, though? Screwing like the windmill on the schoolhouse? Well, well, Kitty, woman. Oh, Kirry, Kirry. Wherever did she get it, then? Good sakes, the girl's twisting herself into knots." Pete was pulling away at the fiddle with both hands, like a bottom sawyer, his eyes dancing, his lips quivering, the whole soul of the lad lifted out of himself in an instant. "Hold on still, Kate. Hold on, girl," he shouted. "Machree, machree, the darling's dancing like a drumstick." "Faster," cried Kate, "faster." The red ribbon had fallen from her head, and the wavy black hair was tumbling about her face. She was holding up her skirt with one hand, and the other arm was akimbo at her waist. Guggling, chuckling, crowing, panting, boiling and bubbling with the animal life which all her days had been suppressed, and famished and starved into moans and groans, she was carried away by her own fire, gave herself up to it, and danced on the flags of the kitchen, which had served Caesar for his practical typology, like a creature intoxicated with new breath. Meanwhile Caesar himself, coming home in his chapel hat, his tall black beaver, from Peel, where he had been buying the year's stock of herrings at the boat's side, had overtaken on the road the venerable parson of his parish, Parson Quiggin of Lezayre. Drawing up the gig with a woe, he had invited the old clergyman to a lift by his side on the gig's seat, which was cushioned with a sack of hay. The parson had accepted the invitation, and with a preliminary "Aisy, your legs a taste higher, sir, just to keep the pickle off your trousers," a gee up, and a touch of the whip, they were away together, with the light of the gig lamp on the hindquarters of the mare, as they bobbed and screwed like a mill race under the splashboard. It was Caesar's chance, and he took it. Having pinned one of the heads of the church, he gave him his views on the Romans and on the general encroachment of popery. The parson listened complacently. He was a tolerant old soul, with a round face expressive of perpetual happiness, though he was always blinking his little eyes and declaring, with the preacher, that all earthly things were vain. Hence he was nicknamed Old Vanity of Vanities. The gig had swept past Sulby Chapel when Caesar began to ask for the parson's opinion of certain texts. "And may I presume, Parson Quiggin, what do you think of the text, 'Praise the Lord, O my soul, and all that is within me praise his holy name'?" "A very good text after meat, Mr. Cregeen," said the parson, blinking his little eyes in the dark. It was Caesar's favourite text, and his fire was kindled at the parson's praise. "Man alive," he cried, his hot breath tickling the parson's neck, "I've praiched on that text, parson, till it's wet me through to the waistcoat." They were near to the Manx Ferry by this time. "And talking of praise," said Caesar, "I hear them there at their practices. Asking pardon now, it's proud I'd be, sir, perhaps you'd not be thinking mane to come in and hear the way we do crown him." "So the saints use the fiddle," said the parson, as the gig drew up at the porch of the inn. Half a minute afterwards the door of the parlour flew open with a bang, and Caesar stood and glared on the threshold, with the parson's ruddy face behind him. There was a moment's silence. The uplifted toe of Catherine trailed back to the ground, the fiddle of Pete slithered to his farther side, and the smacking lips of Niplightly transfixed themselves agape. Then the voice of the parson was heard to say, Vanity, vanity, all is vanity, and suddenly Caesar, still on the threshold, went down on his knees to pray. Caesar's prayer was only a short one. His mortified pride called for quicker solace. Rising to his feet with as much dignity as he could command under the twinkling eyes of the parson, he stuttered, "The capers! Making a dacent house into a theaytre. Respectable person too, one of the first that's going. So," facing the spectators, "just help yourselves home, the pack of you. As for these ones," turning on Kate, Pete and the constable, "there'll be no more of your practices. I'll do without the music of 3 saints like you. In future I'll have 3 sinners to raise my singing. These polices too," he said with a withering smile. Niplightly was worming his way out at the back of Parson Quiggin. "Who began it?" shouted Caesar, looking at Catherine. From the moment that Caesar dropped on his knees at the door, Pete had been well nigh choked by an impulse to laugh aloud, but now he bit his lip and said, "I did." "Behold ye now, as imperent as a goat," said Caesar, working his eyebrows vigorously. "You've mistaken your profession, boy. It's a play actor they ought to be making of you. You're wasting your time with a plain, respectable man like me. You must lave me. Away to the loft for your chiss, boy. And just give sheet, my lad, and don't lay to till you've fetched up at another lodgings." Pete, with his eye on the parson's face, could control himself no longer, and he laughed so loud that the room rang. "Right's the word, old Nebuchadnezzar," he cried, and heaved up to his feet. "So long, Kitty, woman, so long. We'll finish it another night, though, and then the old man himself will be holding the candle." Outside in the road somebody touched him on the shoulder. It was the young man in the alpine hat. "My gough! What, Phil?" cried Pete, and he laid hold of him with both hands at once. "I've just finished at King William's and bought a boat," said Philip, "and I came up to ask you to join me. Congers and cods, you know. Good fun, anyway. Are you willing?" "Willing?" cried Pete. "Am I jumping for joy?" And away they went down the road, swinging their legs together with a lively step. "That's a nice girl, though, Kitty, Kate, what do you call her?" said Phil. "Were you in then? So you saw her dancing?" said Pete eagerly. "Oh, yes, nice," he said warmly. "Nice uncommon," he added absently, and then with a touch of sadness, "shocking nice." Presently they heard the pattering of light feet in the darkness behind them, and a voice like a broken cry, calling, "Pete!" It was Kate. She came up panting and catching her breath in hiccups, took Pete's face in both her hands, drew it down to her own face, kissed it on the mouth, and was gone again without a word. End of Part 1, Chapter 5. Recording by Tony Ashworth.